Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Douglas A. Burton, and tonight I have three wonderful guests joining me, and we're going to go through the comprehensive history of Lucasfilm during the Kennedy era, which is 2012 to 2025. We're going to go through the context of it all and kind of really relook at everything. We're going to critique it. We're going to review it. We're going to recontextualize it in the sense that we believe this era is done, and also for the historical value of it, what it meant then and what it might mean now. So joining me, first and foremost, Heath Robinson. You want to tell everyone who you are and where they could find you?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Heath Robinson. My main channel is Heath's Geekverse, where we cover tabletop games, especially role-playing games. I do the Morning Grind live stream there. But then also, you may know us from Table Talk, which is a separate channel where we talk about stories and storytelling. And Doug is a frequent guest there, as well as Retro Nerd Girl. So if you're interested in that kind of material, well, then Table Talk's the place to be.
That's right. And also we have joining us Retro Nerd Girl. She specializes in going through and kind of preserving almost museum-like retrospectives of some of the older movies up to, what would you say, the 80s, maybe 90s, more 80s?
Actually, I'm expanding, and so we're starting from silent films, and we're going towards maybe the films that have been in the last 10 years. So I give it a good 10 years.
And she's got great perspective on films, a ton of film lore in her mind, and she's also a huge Star Wars fan and has strong opinions, like many of us do, about Star Wars, the good and the bad, during the Kennedy era. And so, Retro, do you want to tell everyone where they could find you?
Yes, you can find me at Retro Nerd Girl on YouTube and also on X.
All right. And then last but not least, we have Lance from the Outcasts Creative. Lance has worked in the industry as an insider in the UK for many decades. And so he's going to be able to bring some perspective about the practical reality of filmmaking, maybe do some myth busting on what is unusual versus what is not that unusual in film. And also some perspective on how it works in the background and where some of the things that happened during Lucasfilm were okay and where they strayed into the absurd. So, Lance, you want to tell everyone where they could find you?
Yeah, several decades. That makes me sound so old. Yeah, so hi, I just want to say first and foremost, I am an original first generation Star Wars fan who saw Star Wars in the summer of '77 in the UK, like everybody else saw it in the UK. You can find me on the Outcasts Creative channel. The purpose of our channel primarily is to support other creative people. So if you have a project, like you have a game on Kickstarter, or maybe you've got a book coming out on Amazon, you might be making a movie. If you're a creative in any of the creative genres, music, whatever it might be, we're always interested in getting you on, interviewing you and supporting you. We interview people across all the creative arts, including people that have been in the trenches, like myself, for many decades. I've had Gail Ann Hurd on, I've had actor Damon Herriman recently, director Ron Underwood, who did Tremors, and I just hit my 104th interview this Monday. So, yeah,
Oh, wow.
So hoping to hit, well, I don't know if we'll hit 200 by the end of the year, but we're certainly going to hit 150. So, yeah, do come along. We do movie reviews and things like that. We have 2 weekly shows where we tend to mainly recommend stuff, a bit like Retro. We like to recommend things that we think are good. So we do like a weekly one every Tuesday at 10 o'clock UK time. That's usually the new releases. And then on Sunday at 8 o'clock, we do Chew the Fat, where we do an in-depth review on stuff like Band of Brothers, The Shield. We did Crimson Tide and The Hunt for Red October last week. And there'll always be a theme. So, yeah, lots of interesting content, I hope. And long may that continue. You know. And thanks very much for inviting me on. I've got lots of thoughts on this subject.
Well, we're very interested in hearing them. We have a lot to cover. So last week we released part 1 of the history of Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy. and that spanned the years of 2012 to 2015. We covered in depth the situation of Lucasfilm in 2012, the handoff to Disney, what it meant, the few things that came out early then, and also I think we left off with the trailer, which was a big deal when it first dropped. So, Rogue One did well. And I would say this marks the point where this tide starts to pull back here at Lucasfilm. And in fact, I was going to say, after putting together this timeline and looking at it, the event that I believe, from a fate point of view, marks the turning of the tide is the death of Carrie Fisher. She died right around this time, right after.
That was that sort of 2-week period where we lost. I think, didn't we lose George Michael?
December.
And we lost.
Oh yeah,
like
that was it was
four.
in December. Yeah, right at the end of a year, right? And we lost a bunch of people.
Yeah,
right
there
then,
was
right.
like 5 massive icons went within about 3 weeks, and because somebody said there's a hell of a pop concert going on in heaven right now. Carrie Fisher's going to be walking into a star-studded event. All these people had suddenly gone. Yeah.
Well, and we saw Han Solo die in Force Awakens, and now the actress Carrie Fisher has passed away, before The Last Jedi comes out. And so, what do you do with the last film? So there's definitely some concern that this is tragic news. She's beloved, Carrie Fisher. She was beloved. Princess Leia is a lot of people's favorite character. She's one of the great female heroines of all time. So losing Carrie Fisher was a blow. It's a blow to Star Wars. It's a blow to the fandom. It's a blow to Hollywood. So this was pretty bad news. And it came out late in December 27th of 2016. So after Rogue One, but before The Last Jedi is when she left us. So now there is, with Rogue One coming out, you have 2 female-led Star Wars films. And so there is this thing growing culturally about female leads in Star Wars or in film. So for years you would have male leads pretty much in action films and a lot of these things. And they just said you couldn't really do it too much with female leads. And so here, now you've got Force Awakens, the highest grossing film of all time, female lead. And now you got Rogue One with a female lead. So, Retro, what would you say the layout is for female leads in films at this time that Star Wars is making its big splash? What was going on that front?
Well, I think initially, I think for fans, they weren't really complaining much about it or saying anything about it. They were actually looking forward to the next movies to see if they were going to develop Rey. But at that very time, there was a lot of positive press about it. Now, we did have one critic that kind of emerged on the scene in about 2016, and that was Max Landis, the son of John Landis. And he did a video on his channel. He was a screenwriter at the time, growing in popularity. And he was saying, Rey is not a really great, well-written character. And he referred to her as a Mary Sue. And the internet went crazy. The internet crazy. And as we were starting to learn, okay, what is a Mary Sue? And what does that mean? And also, why is he referring her to that? Initially, a lot of pushback, about him, hating the movie or also misogynistic claims. But there were also a lot of people saying, yeah, we kind of looking at her character and asking, hey, yeah, it does fit the bill.
I didn't know he was the guy that made this initial comment. My reaction to that is the Force is strong with this one. You know, he could see it all coming, couldn't he? Clearly.
Well,
very
yeah. I mean, when
astute.
yeah. So, does anyone know where the term Mary Sue came from? Heath, do you know?
I do. In fact, I was just looking that up with regard to Star Trek. So yes, yes.
Yeah, so Star Trek fan fiction is where this came up with. They created a character named Mary Sue, and she joins the Enterprise, and Kirk likes her, and Bones likes her, and Spock likes her, and she solves the puzzles, and no real pushback from anybody, and she wins a promotion. So she basically glides through the franchise. She's well liked by everybody. Nobody hates her. There's no major interpersonal conflicts, and she overcomes all the challenges that appear. So that is what defined what a Mary Sue was. It's a character that is just beloved and rarely struggles. And so suddenly he applies this to Rey, and you rewatch Force Awakens, and you're like, huh. Yeah, Han likes her right away. All the legacy character, Leia's hugging her. And so you start to see those hallmarks, even in The Force Awakens, that she's immediately beloved by the legacy characters. And she beats Kylo Ren the first time out. She knows how to fly the Millennium Falcon. She bypassed the compressor. Han didn't even think of that. So, there is this case kind of there. But at this point, Force Awakens was still considered the juggernaut film, and it had the benefit of us not knowing what comes next. So there's still sort of optimism with Rey, optimism with the next film, optimism with Star Wars. So, but yeah, it started to be. But there did get to be this issue with women in film. And Retro, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to say on that. I do have some commentary on where we were in 2015 with that.
No, I don't think so. It just spurred a lot of conversation and a lot of critics that were really praising The Force Awakens. We're starting to say, they were starting to say, okay, he may have a point. We're looking at the character Rey, and we're seeing how she is perfect at everything. She beats the bad guy in the first movie. What else is left for her to accomplish in the other movies?
Right.
And so we're all asking that same question. Critical minds are asking this kind of. We're not going to just take any slop from Disney because they give us a story that looks like the thing that we love. We actually want a good story. So this is part of the analysis of a movie that we are hoping to watch over and over and over again and enjoy like we did the first movies. And that's why this matters.
Well, but the media fought back. This is where we began to see that media encroachment, being like, no. If you're saying that, you're a misogynistic guy. This is bad. So there was definitely a battle going on in the media over this. And I remember one of the big arguments was, films should, is there now an appetite for female leads in film? There was this big thing, and at the time, there was evidence that there was starting to be a big turnaround for more female-led stories. Game of Thrones was red hot at around this time, and this show was loaded with a bunch of female leads. Just a couple of them, that was Brienne of Tarth, who's in Force Awakens. You had Catelyn Stark. You had Cersei Lannister. You had Daenerys Targaryen, Ilaria Sand. You had little Lyanna Mormont. Marjorie Tyrell and Olenna. You had, I think, Melisandre, the Scarlet Witch, Yara Greyjoy, Ygritte. It was just loaded with heroic women in film. So you did get this sort of like cultural moment where you're getting a lot more female leads. And Lance, I know you've been wanting to talk about this. One of the first ever, this woman was very big. One of the first ever action stars of all time.
Well, I love the fact that Sigourney Weaver actually responded, who is an A-lister, queen of Hollywood, more so I would say than Lawrence, and really pushed. She made a pretty public statement and came back straight away and said, yeah, hey, yeah, that of course there were no important female characters in Alien or Aliens, and I don't know what it is with Lawrence, because listen, when I saw Hunger Games, I loved her character. I hadn't read the books. I thought it was a great adaptation, and saw it with my ex-partner Odeon Leicester Square. It wasn't the opening night. We went a bit later. We went in an afternoon. There was only about 40 people in there, but we loved the movie. And then you would sort of see her in interviews and stuff, and she started kind of, digging her own grave. There was that time where she had a go at that reporter who was actually trying to upload a translation app, or he was using his translation app on his phone, and she thought he was texting somebody during her press conference, which, she called him out in public, and actually turned out that she was wrong, and just started behaving, because she went quite quickly when her career took off. And
Yes.
And I think we see a mindset in Hollywood around this time of actors of this generation, and I'll call another one out, Bradley Cooper. There's this real arrogance of, look at me, I'm amazing, you owe me awards and you owe me box office. And a prime example of that is Bradley Cooper's, Oscar-driven black and white project about the composer, or what, I can't even remember the name of it.
Oh yeah.
That no one went to see, and it might as well have just been called Oscar Gold, because that's what, when you got that thing in Family Guy where, oh, not Family Guy, the one with the other one, American Dad.
American Dad.
Yeah, where the alien is Roger's trying to get an Oscar, so he writes a film called Oscar Gold. So there was her comment, the timing of that. Definitely, there was this mentality of arrogance in Hollywood. I'm not putting that on women. I'm putting that on the generation around that time that was starting to make the key decisions, and I think that's reflected in the quality of the product that we got going forward with Star Wars and Disney. There was an arrogance of, we know best. Don't tell us how to do our job. We know best. We're going to give you what we think you want, which invariably was not the case.
Well, but there was this growing zeitgeist that we're getting more female leads, and there was like Finding Dory came out, not too long before The Force Awakens, where you take the franchise and you replace it with a female character from the first film, and now that's the lead character. The Marvelous Miss Maisel, very successful TV show. Game of Thrones, extremely successful, very female driven. You had Maleficent in 2014 with Angelina Jolie. That was considered a successful film. And also then you had The Force Awakens with Rey, which broke all the records. And also in 2015, you get Hunger Games, obviously was there. But and in 2015, you also get this film Mad Max, where you take another a very male-centric franchise, you make a female the lead, and you really focus on her. Mad Max was very much kind of a side character. Now he
was a supporting character in his own film, and
right.
It actually worked in that film, because that film had a damn good script. It had a very consistent visual aesthetic, and it worked. I didn't rate it as highly as some people do. There's a black and white version of it that got a limited release. That version is really interesting to watch, because he shot it so that it would work in black and white.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But what I'm sensing here is that all of the movies that you mentioned just now, they're all working for the public.
Yeah, they're all good.
This was an Oscar-winning film.
Yeah,
the Mad Max one.
Oh yeah, Best Picture. Like, it was nominated for a ton.
I think they're all driven by the number one writing rule, which is story is king. And if this amazing female protagonist, or if putting this protagonist in front of Mad Max is going to work for the story, then it's king. And that all the projects that you mentioned, like Retro just said, they're all stuff that worked because the stories for those were all good. So the characters fitted in with those narratives.
That's right. You are getting female-centric storytelling a lot of these stories are very well received. Hidden Figures came out in 2016.
Yeah, I like that film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great film.
These are all a pleasure to watch.
Right, a pleasure to watch, character-driven, female-centric storytelling, and it's at this stage, I feel like it's mostly working, even with the arguments that you hear a lot of people say today, like she's hijacking the franchise. Well, Furiosa hijacked Mad Max successfully. Dory hijacked the Finding Nemo thing successfully. These were good movies. But something happened right around this time, which does cause a big problem. So then Rogue One came out. You've got the Mary Sue issue coming out there on Rey. And then in 2016, you get Ghostbusters, female Ghostbusters.
Oh, man.
This is a turning point in this argument,
Yeah.
and Star Wars is going to get wrapped up in the tornado of this hot debate over female-centric storytelling. This even got politicized during the election season that year. This is when I first saw the media just brazenly coming after people saying, if you don't like this film, you're misogynist, you're a bigot, you're probably a Trump supporter. Like, they were coming out hard. Like, you either support the women, you support the ladies who worked really hard to put this movie together, or you're a terrible person. And the media was running these stories in late 2016, leading up to the release of the next Star Wars film.
Yeah.
And like Retro said, Rey's already getting a little bit of flack on the Mary Sue side.
Yeah.
And then we also had Rogue One.
Actually, when they announced this film, I think the original plot line was that the characters were going to be daughters of the previous characters.
Which were
really cool.
And I thought, yeah, do you know what? That works, because then we can get them back in cameos. And I quite like the idea of a female Ghostbusters. Good script. I think it could be really funny. And what they unfortunately did was they take 4 people from Saturday Night Live, because Bill Murray and Harold Ramis are both great comedians, but they're also both great straight actors as well. Whereas these 4 actors are not. And they let them improvise. You can tell, like, most of the scenes are not fully scripted. They're improvised, and they're doing this thing where they think it's funny and they're having a laugh, but we're not laughing. It's absolutely appalling, dreadful film.
I don't think it lies in the talent of the ladies, to be very honest.
Well, they weren't reined in.
Yeah, they weren't reined in, and I'll say this: they did the same thing. They thought they were going to be able to do the same thing that Force Awakens did successfully for a time, which was reboot the franchise, but also give you some of the old people come back in to make cameos. And they only did that because people were like really upset at the fact that what was wrong with the original Ghostbusters. All the actors are still available. Why couldn't we just had a part 3? And they're right there. And so and so they ended up having to put them back in the movie anyway. There was no script really, but some ideas and vibes. And then they shot all of that with everybody improvising everything. And some of the improvisation wasn't bad, but they let them go on for too long. So nobody knew how to hit the cut button on the editing machine. It was really atrocious. It's hilarious, actually, when you look at it back again. It's really funny. You have a good time with this movie, just laughing at all of the basic mistakes of filmmaking that they've done in this thing. And they had a bad guy that they were developing, and they had some cool ideas around him, but then they decide to turn him into a marshmallow ghost or whatever, and then shoot him in the crotch. It's like there were so many offensive things that they did in this movie that was just like, man, you had something and you let it, because even with all of the controversy around it, we had with anything you do, there will be somebody who says you should die, and we hate you, and we hate that you're a woman or whatever you are.
Oh, man,
And
I
but
get
you
stuff about me being
don't,
a guy.
yeah. So you don't, however, go on live television and tell the entire fandom, "Oh, you're horrible people that live in the basement," you know. And that's unfortunately, and I like Melissa McCarthy. That's what she did on a late night television. It was awful, and I think that really soured a lot of solid fans that really wanted to see a good Ghostbusters movie. So we, they did a lot of things wrong right out of the gate. And like you were saying, that media strategy of telling all of the papers, and these are all hit pieces. We know that they pay their publicists pay off and also give these stories to journalists who are supposed to do investigative work, who are supposed to be doing really like high end journalism. They're just doing these hit pieces where they put out the ideas that they want to the public and hope that, oh, well, that's going to equal like, you know, $1 billion movie. No, it doesn't, because you have to have a good movie, and they didn't have one. They did not have one.
Well, but this set the tone, right? Retro. I mean, basically, you had the media defending the movie, not being critical of it. You had sort of a, like you said, there's some jokes at the male expense. You know, there's a certain tone, and you're seeing this more and more by 2016. And by the way, this is what I wanted to point out: the industry without the tone shift was already shifting. There was much more action figures that were female. There was female-led stories. There was franchises that shifted from male to female, and it was working. So there was already a shift going on. And then suddenly, somewhere around 2016, it was us versus them. It was very media versus the fans. You had to like a movie, and if you didn't, that said something about you, or it meant that you were a certain type of a person. And and there's an election going on. And this is the fertile ground upon which the next Star Wars movie, who's already got a character who's female-centric, who's starting to get a little bit of flack on the Mary Sue side, and now we have the next movie from Lucasfilm.
Dun, 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 dun.
And they decide, I mean, this is a perfect storm. They aren't half and half. They go all in on one side of this, what is turning into a culture war at this point. They go all in, and we get Star Wars Episode 8. This is supposed to be, remember, this is the Empire Strikes Back of the sequel trilogy. Everyone was pitching it that way. And we get this next film in the installment, and all that goodwill, all the excitement, all the positive vibes that we felt for Force Awakens and Rogue One is literally moving with great momentum toward this film called The Last Jedi. And I remember there being some concerns about the trailer, where there's a voiceover of Luke Skywalker saying the Jedi must end. And people were like, Jedi must end? You know, what happened to Return of the Jedi? So,
we're just getting started with the story. What are you talking about, dude?
Right. So I remember a few people like raising a red flag with that line, and it says The Last Jedi, but then there's Luke first and foremost on the poster, you know, so, and everybody, it was also pitched, The Last Jedi. This is Luke's movie. You know, we didn't get him in the first one, but we're getting, you know, he's back. He's back, baby, in The Last Jedi. And
well, right, because if the first one was Han's movie, then this one's going to be Luke's movie. Then Leia would have been, but then Carrie Fisher died, and you end up with another problem. But right, so here is supposed to be Luke's movie, right?
Right. Yeah. So we're entering kind of a hot button issue with female-centric stories in the big film, and what it means if you support the film or like the film or go to see the film or not. And here we go. Let's see what Lucasfilm's got for the world at this stage. They've got, you know, Daisy. They've got, and I don't want to criticize the actress. She's completely faultless in this. And Daisy Ridley is not well known for coming out and saying belligerent things toward the fans, by the way. Like what you said about Melissa McCarthy.
So, no, I think she did her best with the tools that she was given. She wasn't in charge of the script or the story, excuse me. So, you know, I think she put in a good performance, considering you can't blame the character on her.
Nope.
Yeah, and I think
don't.
fans have always been really gracious towards her. I have not seen anyone blast her or anything just for her performance. They've not been kind to Rey as a character, how she's written. But Daisy is not at fault in that she's not a writer. She's an actor trying to do it the best with what she's got, and I think she has done a good job at it. So
Yeah. I actually flew to Florida. That's me. That's me, my dad, my buddy. I flew to Florida for opening night to see this this film. So at this point, I was very bullish on Star Wars. I had really no animosity. I wasn't into the argument against Rey or anything like that. But I immediately, when the film started, had a problem with this opening sequence.
Oh my God. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there, I'm like eating popcorn. I'm like, oh baby, here we go, Star Wars. And it's an opening night crowd. And Lance, Retro, Heath, opening night crowds are the best crowds. They applaud. They are hooting and hollering and whistling and everything you could think of. And so I'm with this happy crowd. And before the movie, there was a little lead off by Rian Johnson, who says, similar to what you said earlier, Lance, I'm a Star Wars fan. This is my love letter to you. And I was like, man, what a great guy.
I don't think we got that in the UK, or if we did get it, I don't remember. I don't remember it, but then I don't remember much about this film.
I remember just thinking that this guy really cares about us. Roll tape. Let's do it. Let's watch this movie.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah. So the issue wasn't just this setup. So, Lance, in fact, I know that you're sensitive to this. There is something in war and in battle, tactical reality. And Lucas actually captured enough tactical reality in his stories to where you understood the action, you understood the pacing and what was going on. And the strategies on both sides make sense, given the terrain, given the issues, given the objectives. So I'm watching this, and I'm pretty fired up at this point. I'm like, oh, here we go. The resistance is going up against the First Order. And I look at these things, and right away, they start shooting, and they're full of bombs. And one of these things explodes, and a piece of hull shrapnel goes into the next one, and it blows up. And I'm like, why are these things bunched together? If you get one hit and you're exploding, you need to space these things out. That was my first thought. I was like, they didn't think this out.
Space is big. Bombers. You can do that. Space is big. And also there's no fires in space.
Well, that's always been a
one thing I want to say about this is we have already established that ships that are of a bomber class, and we see them in The Empire Strikes Back when they're bombing the asteroid field to try and draw the Falcon out. You've got the double TIE fighter type design, which is a TIE bomber. We've already established that bomber fighters exist, and they're designed to attack bigger craft or bigger targets. They still have the speed and the maneuverability of, not quite as good as a fighter, but not bad. This thing is just nonsense. Somebody watched some World War II film and went, oh yeah, let's do that. As you say, tactically, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Why would you, if these ships were designed for this purpose, then they're thousands of years old. Maybe that's, and if there'd been something set up that this was all we could get hold of, okay, but they didn't do any setup for that. So, this might have worked at the end of the movie as a kind of, these were all we could get, in which case the stakes were high, and it makes sense.
They do that too.
it just, it doesn't make any sense. And these ships are just completely ridiculous. You would rather have a fast ship with 4 bombs on it that's not going to blow up so easily than one of these slow chugging things that are going to get shot down even by a TIE fighter. It's just ridiculous.
Well, this battle put me on guard because I had my doubts about the final battle with Rey and Kylo, right? But hopefully that gets resolved. And now I'm watching a very poorly thought out, poorly imagined battle scenario with tools that even the filmmaker doesn't seem to know how to use. Like if these are your bombers, you don't bunch them up if they're going to explode. It's like a domino. Like, so I just remember looking at my buddy. I was like, oh man, that's a stupid battle. This is a dumb battle for Star Wars. And then we get, and this bothered me too, and I'm sure you guys will have some comment. Finn. Finn starts to be played for laughs in this, and I gave it some. I didn't react right away because maybe it's the movie's just trying to warm us up and make us laugh. But upon the second rewatch, I realized that Finn has been demoted for this film. He's been demoted, and right there you have Rose Tico upstaging what is now, Finn at this point is a new legacy sequel trilogy character. He was one of the main characters of The Force Awakens. And when we first see him, he's in that goo and all that. And then this unknown character takes him down. She tases him and takes him down. And I remember being like, I don't like that. I don't like that she just took Finn down like that. Like, what were your impressions? Let's start, Heath, maybe with you. What did you react to that with any sort of positive or negative?
Well, I was trying to remember Finn, and I can't because he starts to drop off. The character of Rose Tico, I mean, she could have been so much better. I mean, I forget what's the actress's name? I think that she took probably like undeserved flack online.
Yes.
But she's not, like, even looking at this picture right here, it does seem like, we're going to put Rose Tico in here, but she cannot upclass Rey at all. And as far as costume design and stuff like that, I mean, this is not any kind of like flattering way for her character to be displayed, which is of course not her fault. But if you're looking for a new Star Wars character, her character was not done well.
Well, this is where I learned the term the male gaze, and that there's a thing growing in Hollywood where you don't make the actress look attractive, because attractive to who? To men? We're not trying to pander to men. We're not interested in your male gaze and this sort of like provocative bravado coming from the media with a feminist slant, that now to see her as beautiful is bad. Like, I'm being a bad guy. I'm wanting her to meet a standard that only men aspire to. And so you start to, and you will see this more and more around this time, where they actually dress down the actress with the attitude of, she doesn't have to be beautiful. And if you see pictures of her her name is Kelly Marie Tran, by the way.
She's a knockout.
Thank you.
She's beautiful. So it's like, I'm sure she saw herself in the mirror on and she was like, okay, well, maybe we'll make this work. It's a shame that this thinking got in the way, because the reality is, men or women, you like to see attractive people. It's just the way people are. And how much more interesting would it be if we got Kelly Marie Tran, the beauty she had, portrayed on screen? I think it would have been a big attribute. So
I think she could, her look could have been fine if she was written properly as this kind of cool tomboy, but her character is just utter rubbish. It's some of the worst writing in this trilogy ever, and it also doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
I'd like to say, though, introducing her in that particular way with Finn, after experiencing him in the first movie, all the things that he had been through, and the sacrifices, and he goes in, tries to save Rey, and has this backslash. He's in the infirmary. To have some character come in and sort of manhandle him like that is just
totally
kind of insulting to what we had just wanted. We actually care for him. So we immediately set up a sense of anger against anyone who's trying to do anything physically harmful to this character. They don't really understand what that did psychologically for people.
Well, it makes you not like her character initially. Your
Immediately.
first impression of her is bad.
Yeah, immediately.
So there's that. So this movie is off. And by the way, I am still positive, bullish here. I'm just noticing, and I have this, I'm sure everyone does. Something starts to hit you funny, and you're like, ooh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Oops, that's wrong. This thing keeps triggering as I'm watching The Last Jedi. And we have to talk about this because this was one of the big ones. We had all that promise at the end of the Force Awakens.
Oh my God.
For Luke Skywalker. And now we're finally getting, remember, this is Luke's movie. He's on the poster, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm watching. And I remember just this
Yeah.
scene is inexplicable unless you're trying to portray him poorly, because
Well,
I can't imagine.
they're just trying to milk it for comedy, literally, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But why this? You have him fall over and hit his head. Well, do some vaudevillian slapstick. Who said, I know what we got to do? We have to have him go up to a breast on a sea animal and milk it and chug away. That'll really, we're going to slay the crowd with this one.
No. I kind of see what they were trying to do. Like when Luke first meets Yoda, Yoda's like, he's like a little goofy and silly. Yeah. And so they were trying to kind of do it. They just didn't do it the proper way with him.
Well, there is an archetypal pattern to Yoda. The trickster is creating chaos for your hero. He's testing the hero. And it's a great moment in Empire Strikes Back when Luke is like, I don't know what we're doing here. We're wasting our time. And Yoda, who's been this giggling trickster imp, suddenly stiffens and he's like, I cannot teach him. And you realize this is this wise Jedi master from an age ago. And his presence fills that little mud hut. And you're like, oh my God, holy cow, this trickster is actually testing. I didn't get that out of Luke.
No, right. Yeah.
I did not get the wise mentor testing this pupil. I got a mentor who's like, this sucks. Being a Jedi is, what a joke. We couldn't even stop a Sith Lord.
Okay, this proves that whoever's writing doesn't understand Star Wars. They never got it. They never understood those archetypal characters. Didn't understand that was just a ruse. It was they just
right.
It all blends together for them. They don't really understand the significance, and that's sad. That's sad.
It is sad because it's also fundamentally confusing for the audience member, because technically, since he wasn't in The Force Awakens, the real last time we caught up to Luke with any substance, because this is the first time we hear from him, he responds. The last time we saw Luke was Return of the Jedi. So we have to go all the way back to 1983 for this character here. And what did he do? The name of the movie is Return of the Jedi. We saw in The Force Awakens that Jedi did not return. So now here we are, really near the end of this trilogy. And Luke's in this weird place where he doesn't even believe in the Jedi. And his basic argument, if you listen to what he says in this movie, is that the Jedi from the prequel era allowed a Sith Lord to take over the Senate.
Which is not true.
Why bother with the Jedi Order if they couldn't even catch this guy? I'm like, okay, fair criticism of the Jedi Order, but what's missing in your analysis, and this is important, is all the actions of the Sith Lord that blew up planets and executed Order 66 and killed people. You don't have any judgment about that being bad too? And maybe there is still a place for Jedi to oppose people like that? Sith Lords? So it's this weird self-critical mentality that leaves open nothing about actual bad action, not flawed people who came up short and failed in maybe their mission statement, but people who have an objectively evil mission statement who succeeded. He has not addressed that. How do you stop evil? Well, I'm not worried about stopping evil. I'm just upset that the good guys were dumb. They made mistakes. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's you are giving up on them because of that. You weren't even around for Order 66.
Yeah,
So,
and many of them died. They didn't just let that happen. They died.
well,
You know?
totally. And when you watch Revenge of the Sith, it is a tragedy that the Jedi failed. It is a tragedy on a galactic scale. You know, it was like a mass execution of the people who are trying to uphold a moral standard. And at the same time that these guys fail at upholding the moral standard, the democratic institutions all collapse, and your greatest hero chooses the dark side all at once. It's actually pretty impressive. And who stands
I
up
think
to
there's-
all of this? This guy.
I think it's worth mentioning his last line, in well, not his last line, but one of his last lines in Return of the Jedi is, "I'm a Jedi, like my father before me," and the way he says it is basically, "And I will always be a Jedi," you know. And that character mentality, even if he has gone away and done a Yoda and decided to cut himself off from the galaxy, it should still be there, not this grumpy, cantankerous old man who looks like he runs a sweet shop and
That's
is
right.
unhappy
Well,
about it. You know,
Lance,
it's just,
structurally, you just brought up a great point that I never thought about before. That line.
that's why
I
I'm
have
here.
something I refer to as the sacred fire, which is
Mhm.
there's a relationship
Yes.
between cultural continuity and individual excellence that the hero is pressured toward, and usually it's symbolic. In Star Wars, it's Luke's lightsaber. That's your father's lightsaber. It's a weapon of a Jedi Knight, and Luke cares about this. He's like,
Yes.
you know, I want to be a Jedi like my father. You know, that's what causes him to accept the call to adventure. And that line that you just pointed out is brilliant because it actually seals the deal. I never thought about it before, but when he says, "You failed, I'm a Jedi like my father. I'm a Jedi," so he succeeded in his personal quest like my father. I'm also continuing something important in the Skywalker lineage. That's the sacred fire. It's individualistic and culturally relevant in terms of continuity. What this does is completely abandon any concern Luke Skywalker has about Anakin Skywalker and what came before him. And this is a
Yes.
This is a recurrent problem in The Last Jedi. Let the past die. The fact that Rey has no parents of importance. All of this talks about these characters as if nothing existed before them.
Yes.
All of it says the same thing.
That is very interesting. To put it in the context of like everyday life, if you want to, it's like burning down every museum on planet Earth, burning all the libraries. It's catastrophic. None of that matters. All that matters is starting completely over from scratch with us. And it makes no sense for somebody who saw the evil that can come from just sitting on the sidelines. The Empire came to power, and people, and it wasn't just the Jedi. People allowed this to happen, and he was the one person, and along with the rebels, to fight against that. And so him just sitting back drinking blue milk and throwing away his father's lightsaber. Oh my goodness.
Does he even mention Anakin in this?
I
No,
can't
think-
remember
I
it.
don't
if-
think-
No, I
I
don't
think
remember.
so. I don't think
Because
so.
Lance, you make a great point. Luke, when he throws away his lightsaber, that says a lot because he's
Yeah.
facing the Emperor. This isn't like a stormtrooper with a blaster. This is the Emperor. This is the ultimate Sith Lord. He throws his lightsaber away, which basically says, "I'm complete no matter what." So he's saying, "I'm willing to die because I believe in my father. I'm willing to die. You'll have to kill me." And then the Emperor's like, "Deal. So be it, Jedi." And he zaps him. Luke doesn't have an answer for that Force lightning. Luke has no answer for this. He's literally paralyzed on the ground, and Vader is watching this and processing this, and he's like, Vader can't let the sacred fire die either. That's his continuity. His son. That's continuity for Vader too. So what does Vader do? He kills the Emperor. He throws him down the bottomless pit, like we talked about. That's how villains are supposed to die.
Yeah.
So
supposedly kills him.
well, yeah.
At
Honestly,
the time, that was it.
Yeah.
No
And
one's ever
then
truly
it
dead.
exploded later, which is also like, how do you
Yeah.
come back from an explosion.
Well,
So,
his
yeah.
spirit was trapped in a gas pipe or something.
So
This is
were
very
you
reminiscent
having-
of Alien 3, Doug, where you've set up all these great stakes. You've put these people through all of this awful stuff for them to survive and come out the other side. And this whole tossing of the lightsaber thing really reminds me of. And then what do they do in Alien 3? They kill off Hicks and they kill off Newt in the opening credit.
inexplicable.
Oh yeah,
That's unforgivable.
It's just
a
and
slap in the face.
none of the actors from Aliens were very impressed with that. They spoke about it at the Comic-Con in Scotland last weekend. There's a great video with them talking about exactly that point on
Wow.
YouTube. It's well worth seeing.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
In fact, it's a great thing to bring up as Alien 3 because I remember having similar reaction because they killed off Newt and Hicks in like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It got booed. It got booed at the opening night, Leicester Square. I was there. Got booed. when it finished.
Wow. I didn't see it opening night. I think I saw it opening weekend. I was in high school when Alien 3 came out, and it was exciting because Aliens was one of my favorite all-time movies. But I remember having a similar reaction to watching Alien 3 being like, no, this is all wrong. This can't. What are they doing?
Oh no, I saw
That's how
the
I felt.
trailer and I was out. I'm like, I'm out.
With
And
Alien
Aliens
3?
is Aliens is like one of my favorite movies. And I was like, I saw that trailer. I was like, nope, I'm out. What is this?
Yeah.
No.
Well, so that's Luke. So this is a major problem for me watching the film, and it sounds like for all of you. I don't really know too many people. I've argued with people that said Luke being like this makes perfect sense, but I was like, no.
There are people who say that.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
we also
but
have our-
You've got to give us a
you-
good reason why. You've got to
Yeah.
fill in the gaps for us, and that they never did.
You could have had him do that and be this way, but as Retro says, you've then got to justify it, or maybe, he would have, I would have done it like he goes to take the lightsaber and then goes, no, I can't, and then she's like, why? And then okay, we go into that conversation, keep it short and sharp, and but anyway, that's my Star.
honestly,
That's
the
my
way this
Star
should have
Wars
been done-
movie.
Yeah, and I'll keep this brief. Return of the Jedi says the Jedi are back. So I would have started the sequel trilogy with Luke refounding the Jedi Order. I mean, that is basic.
That's
The question
wonderful.
is, you have to resolve in this final sequel trilogy. You're not just resolving the original trilogy, you're also resolving the prequels. You have to. This sequel trilogy never even really addresses the prequels, which is a problem because the moral failing occurs in the prequels. The government fails, the Jedi fail, Anakin failed, the Skywalkers failed. All of that goes down in the prequels. The original trilogy is what? It's A New Hope. This is the effort to come back. And the sequel trilogy is, how do we come back? How do we come back? So Luke should have, his main goal in the sequel trilogy should have been, how do we have a Jedi Order that doesn't run into the problems that destroyed them?
Yes.
So he should have said, should we reconsider having attachments? Should we be involved in politics? Should we ever get involved in warfare? These are the questions that doomed the Jedi in the prequels. So I would have set up a scenario where Leia, who's the Supreme Chancellor, is dealing with a separatist style or an Imperial holdout planet, and she needs help from Luke and the Jedi, and he refuses. He's like, that's what doomed him the last time. And then she sends these guys in, and they get destroyed. Show the problem. Well, should we ever intervene as Jedi? Should we maybe intervene once in a while? Show them dealing with the problems that doomed them in the first prequel and trying to solve them in the sequel trilogy. All that's out the window in this. But the good news is we do get a fearsome new military commander for the rebellion or the resistance. An admiral, no less.
Admiral Purplehead.
Yeah, you're pretty familiar with the military. Does she strike you as a military admiral?
I mean,
She's
the guy in
well,
the
I
back actually has a uniform on. Like you gotta present the right
Yeah,
uniform. Like what is this?
We've seen. She looks like she's just come from like some sort of
Cocktails.
conference. Yeah, like working conference bar, socializing, networking event or something. I mean,
I literally imagine the writer's room where someone in there was like, why do we have to make her look military? Why can't she look elegant? Like I can picture
well,
this in my head. And they're like,
Yeah,
there's not many people
yeah.
on the writers' room on this one, so
Yeah. And we
which is-
can defeat the new bad guys with sprinkles and glitter. Like that
Well, there's-
that doesn't track. I mean, it's just really ridiculous.
well, but there's a reason for military uniforms. A, the uniformity lets us know whose side you're on. In combat, that can get confusing. I've actually talked to military veterans, and the things they tell me are counterintuitive. They're like, I know Vietnam veterans who are like, you can unload your entire clip at a guy that's 20 feet away and hit nothing. He goes, it's surprising, and you don't even know yourself how you missed. So you need to have a uniform so that you can understand each other and know that you're on the same team. And two, you have to have insignia because the chain of command is absolutely vital, especially under stress. So an admiral that would put herself into a combat situation with none of this just demonstrates a complete detachment from military logic, which the rebels do espouse, even in Return of the Jedi. General Madine, he's got his insignia. The rebels had their uniforms.
It
So
should've
yeah,
been-
yeah. There's no continuity there with the previous design, is there? Basically,
no.
It's
A
just,
uniform also keeps you from having to worry about what you have to wear in the morning.
Yes.
Like seriously,
Yeah.
like where do you wear to work? If you were in a
There's
uniform,
an entire
you never have to think about it.
discipline. Yeah, well, I think Heath also exactly along those lines. Men in the military, or men and women in the military, there's an entire culture around preserving the uniform, how to fold it, how to keep it clean, how to be presentable. Like there's an entire lesson in presentation in with your uniform, and there's inspections, line inspections. So
what we didn't know until this film is that there's also a subculture and business of hair salons being on rebel ships, which are big business for female commanders.
Oh no,
she's got no
an
roots.
alien. No,
Who keeps
she's
up
an
with this?
alien. Her hair is always perfect.
Is she an alien? Is that in the law? I don't. All I remember about her is
I'm
that
just messing with you.
she makes what I remember about her character is she makes terrible decision after terrible decision, starts conflict with other characters where there's no need for actual conflict, and also oversees the slowest, most unexciting space chase in cinematic history.
This scene
cinematic
is the most cringiest thing I've seen on Star Wars ever. I'm like, was this necessary
I got so
to
mad.
like dehumanize people just to to prove a point or whatever? Oh, you stay in your place and in your lane. I'm a woman. And then it was like, if she was a male character, would she be doing that? Was it to assert that she was a woman and just take the orders and shut up because I outrank you? That was kind of confusing to me, and I'm like, they're in a war that requires them to really think outside the box. Don't you want every idea? This is different than the sort of like Imperial or the new order, where there is that system of like, we don't listen to people who are lower than us, where this supposed to be is more of a community of people we're rooting for. We can't root for people that are just snarky.
If you look closely in this photo, you can see
horrible.
Kathleen Kennedy's fingerprints all over this character.
Awful.
Right.
It's so horrible.
Lance, so when this scene started to take place, this is where you are starting to see the encroachment of some of those culture war issues you heard in the media.
Social.
Actually steering a scene in Star Wars, where because there's no way you can watch this and be like, this is normal characterization. The first thing most people are thinking is, oh, this is like a feminist statement.
Yes.
This is a feminist statement. She's putting him in his place.
Yeah.
And
I remember my ex-partner turned to me in the cinema and said, this character is so poorly written, and she's not a scriptwriter or anything. She's just someone who goes to the movies to enjoy films. And turned around to me and said, this character is poorly written. She's shit. She wouldn't say this. She wouldn't say that. It's just This is
Well, and she
nonsense.
literally, he comes up, he's like, let me get him X-Wing. I'll take care of it, which in Star Wars world is code for, I'm going to take on a huge risk as a hero and try to save the day. And what does she do? She's like, you sit down. We don't want heroes here. And I'm like, in Star Wars, take a
Come
seat.
on, you know, yeah.
Worst line
the
of dialogue in
entire,
Star
like,
Wars ever.
Yeah. No
and-
heroes needed.
Yeah, it just makes no sense. It's anti-Star Wars, and I would say this entire film is anti-Star Wars. The entire thing is anti-Star Wars. It's like anything you thought about Star Wars, or the lore of characters, the lore of everything. Can we just get rid of it so I can tell my story?
Yeah,
Well,
So
100%. So yeah, she comes. So there, but you see that there's a tone shift in the film. To be perfectly fair, for all the faults in Force Awakens, most of the faults were structural and storytelling errors. There really wasn't a lot of messaging or encroachment in Force Awakens, and that was only 2 years ago. So we see that the culture shift that we were talking about with the rise of the so-called girl boss and female-centric films and Fury Road and Hunger Games and Game of Thrones, and then Ghostbusters. Now you're seeing that the thinking behind that movement is actually starting to show up in the Star Wars films itself and in the dialogue, and not in a way that's helping this film. It's not creating more drama or tension. I even got mad later because there's a moment she puts him in his place pretty hard here, and it's pretty nauseating.
Yeah, this is a neutering scene. Okay, this is a neutering scene because this was made to make this character, sit out this one, or whichever one, maybe the whole film. But it just was meant to take him out of the idea, like, oh, he's one of our new heroes that's going to save the day. No, it's not. It's gonna be
She even says, she's like, you're dangerous. And she says it kind of like, yeah, it's kind of fun, but we don't want this here. And then 2 minutes later, he's like, permission to go blow stuff up. And General Leia is like, permission granted. So I was like,
thank you.
Make up your mind. Do you want people to go for it or not?
There were several things that were anti-messaging like that. With okay, we don't need heroes here. There was also the weird, and you probably get to it, but the same kind of the messaging subject with the going to the casino planet, which was so bizarre and unnecessary. But that had some weird messaging that, like, oh, and other people in the comments, I'm sure, will be able to remember exactly, because I've only watched this movie twice. But it's something about, okay, we were able to free these space horses or something, and like you've got the whole rebellion on the line, and the resistance on the line, and you've flown over here somehow. You've gotten away from the First Order to fly over here to this casino thing. You're like, well, gee, the line something like, well, at least we freed some space horses. Even if all of this,
come back and do that later.
Even if all of the resistance is over, at least we freed the space horses. The messaging is also then weird once they get to the salt planet. Because it wasn't like Finn going to sacrifice himself in order to destroy the thing
that was insane.
And then like Rose decided, no, you got to fight for what you love, and and you don't let the person like save the messaging is very off in a lot of this, deliberately being anti-Star Wars.
I've got an industry rumor story to tell you about this sequence if you want to hear it.
The casino sequence?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, of course you do. So I heard on the grapevine that it's been said that Rian Johnson wrote this scene, the casino scene, because it's packed full of people with all these really cool exotic costumes, and he wrote that scene, and then he got all of his mates who sort of either worked in artistic things or whatever. They were all extras in that scene. And he told them, I'm going to write a scene where you can all be in it, and you'll all be in all these cool costumes. And apparently a lot of the extras in that scene are friends of his or his social circle.
Yeah, not measuring up to why you make a scene.
Which, I mean, when you think about it, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And you look at the scene and
like a departure from the main plot.
It's more like a scene from a Bond movie if you take the space
It is.
horses out.
Yes.
Yeah, it's you know,
Well, and it's
it's
funny
like,
because they set it up, and she's like, the introduction here, Finn and Rose walk in, and she's like, "Oh my God, this place is full of the worst kind of people." And I was like, "What? A Sith Lord?
friends of Ryan
Bounty
Johnson.
hunter?" No, rich people. I was like, rich people are the worst people in the universe, really, in Star Wars. So that's a classist position, and again, I was like, this feels like a position in the outside world, a philosophy that's now crafting the drama and conflict in a Star Wars film again. and again, I didn't feel that in The Force Awakens. I really didn't.
Yeah.
Most of my problems with The Force Awakens are structural and writing and storytelling issues, which I can accept a lot better than why don't we have an animal cruelty? Why don't we address animal cruelty in our Star Wars film? Why don't we address capitalism in our Star Wars film, or greed? Let's address women's rights. Like, all of these things, you could see that the ideas are there, and now they're changing and adjusting these scenes to accommodate these ideas, which are so overt. By the way, they're not subtle; they're very overt, and so I don't feel like I'm watching a Star Wars movie.
No.
So anyway, they took on capitalism and animal cruelty, and they met that guy DJ, which Benicio del Toro's character was pretty bizarre in that one.
Oh God, it's such
But
a
we got to
waste
come
of
back
talent.
to Admiral Holdo, because she performs the Holdo maneuver,
Holdo maneuver,
which is light speed ramming, and this.
I kind of like that.
Well, I got to say,
I kind of liked this. I was expecting someone to do this in a Star Wars film at some point. It's just a shame it's done by a nonsense character who actually hasn't earned this death.
See,
and
I
therefore
think
is
you could have
meaningless.
done it if it wasn't light speed, because light speed, you're not supposed to be able to do this, because now, why didn't they just do this with the Death? Why not just build a drone with a hyperdrive and plow a few of those into a Death Star? Like, it just seems like,
too easy. Yeah.
Right. It was visually spectacular. It was spectacularly filmed.
It was a cool moment, but without any justification.
They should have also made it where you can you can understand how technically she was able to pull that off. Also, you need it should be the last maneuver that you do, right? Because you are suicide bombing yourself, or you're sacrificing yourself for something. Let it be for dire situation, which I mean, this is pretty, it was a dire situation, but not, I felt like this is your absolute last resort. You've done everything you could possibly do, and it just didn't feel like it, the timing. But it was, I liked the visuals, and
the visual was impressive. I guess my problem with it was that it caused you to start questioning Star Wars physics.
Yeah,
you started being like, oh, well, why didn't they? So it causes more questions than, in my opinion, merits the scene to be kept in there. I think they should have either changed the scene, changed the speed, maybe like in Star Trek, impulse power instead of warp speed. Something like that, a lower speed where maybe you can collide physically into another ship.
I think they just needed some techno bollocks dialogue, as we call it in the industry, to just justify why this would only work one time, because and the stakes of doing it this one time because are also very high and extremely difficult and very rare, so that this can't be done to do blow up Death Stars or attack other big ships in fleets on a regular basis. It's not practical because of blah 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 blah.
Well, and Lance, that's exactly what they do in the next movie.
Yeah,
the Holdo maneuver, that was 1 in a million. But yeah, this definitely, I remember being kind of wowed by the visual.
Yeah,
and then I kept thinking about it, and of course it starts to bother you.
Yeah.
So
it falls apart.
yeah, that's why I think this should have been left out.
I
for the
also think
merit.
this should have been in the last movie and not this one, because I
No.
mean it's too like it's
Yeah.
too big, it's
Yeah.
too fancy for this one. Like this should have had a different tone instead of like this is your big moment. Like
Yeah.
I would have rather it be in the last movie.
Well,
I wish
so-
everything had been left out of this movie, really, just like the whole 2 hours.
So
The crawl and then cut to end credits.
so there's all of these structural errors that I'm already starting to kind of sit here in my seat and be like, oh man, I don't know about this. I don't know about that. And then they kill off Snoke in the middle of this movie. Kill off
that
Snoke.
was,
Stupid. So
that was
stupid.
really bizarre decision making. And again, that's Ryan Johnson, because he's been set up as the villain. So you're going to have him as the villain for the trilogy. No, we're not. We're going to kill him off. We're not going to find out.
Did he
anything
know
really
at this
about
time
him.
that Ryan Johnson know he was just in for this film? I forget that.
I believe
Yeah.
so.
So
Because
if you
Colin
don't have any
Trevorrow-
kind of,
Yeah.
nobody's
I
holding
mean,
you to something else.
Captain, if they were going to kill a villain, Captain Phantasma, who was next to useless anyway, they should have been the one that
Should have been her.
They
because
did
they
kill
like
her in this one.
yeah.
She did die in
They
that
killed
one.
her off in this one. And that scene where BB-8
Oh, did she
was
die
like-
at the end of this? Was it at the end of this film?
Yeah,
that she died?
yeah, she died.
Oh,
She dies.
see,
There's that
it was
scene-
so it was but it's so inconsequential when she dies. I forgot that
No.
it happened in this movie. I thought it was in the next one.
Yeah. No,
Oh, she does.
It was
So
awful.
she does die in The Last Jedi.
And
I have
remember
only
what
seen this
happened?
film once, and that's when I saw it at the cinema. I've never watched it again.
Do you guys remember where there's an AT-ST like in rows and the top of the AT and it's BB-8 piloting this thing and he's shooting at people? I was like, what are we watching? Like, this is awful. This is not convincing, compelling, gripping action. This is like cartoon level, like heroics. It was just awful. But I remember this. This is where I gave up on the film because we had a discussion with my friends afterward, and I said, I go, nope. I go, this film is a franchise killer because they just killed Snoke, and I'm like, we never got to know his background, and now it doesn't matter. Even if they tell us what his background is, it doesn't matter. And now they're going to need. She's beaten Kylo once, and she actually beats him again in this one. So there's nothing left for Rey to do in the last film. There is nothing left. No one to conquer. No one to beat. I go, this is an error, a structural error of the highest magnitude, because now you have to tell a story and almost invent a new character. And how they solved it is to bring back Palpatine. So this is inexplicable. This is such inexplicable storytelling. It seems so amateur to me that he would decide to do this. In his interviews, he's like, well, I subverted expectations. And it's like, you just did
That's
something.
not writing. That's not writing.
That's
I
so
was going
what?
to say
You
something
just
like
need it
this.
to be-
This is also at the high watermark of the subvert expectations discussion, right? Yeah, because that came
Yeah.
from Game of Thrones, from A Song of Ice and Fire, George R. R. Martin, I think, into the TV show, where occasionally, I mean, this can be done well, but then this was the high watermark. Oh no, we subverted expectations. We subverted expectations. That's with all what you're doing is you're teaching your fans to not pay attention to things and not get invested in it, because with everything that was built up with, okay, who is Snoke, who is Rey's parents, what is all of that? Let's look very closely into this. Let's read into different, things that are on screen, the music that's playing at different times, and then the fans construct different theories like, oh no, you thought all of that. Well, I subverted your expectations. That's very easy to just do something completely off the wall. What's difficult is to actually lead the fans someplace that rewards their close reading, as George R. R. Martin calls it, or close watching or close reading of the material. And that when it does happen, if it's something that you didn't see, once it happens, you should look back and go, oh my God, I should have seen that because it was all right
here
there.
are the clues here, here, and here.
Yeah, and we missed it, but it was there. But this is this was right in the era of, no, you're supposed to do just the opposite of what everybody thinks, and that's going to be good storytelling because we're going to call it subverting expectations.
Yeah, it does.
And all it really is doing
the time.
what you're doing, something so bizarre that nobody would have guessed it. That's all you did. You did something so bizarre, like killed the lead villain in the middle of a trilogy. It's so bizarre because nobody would do this. It's not clever. It doesn't enhance the story. It just gives you a moment where the audience is like, what? And that's all you got, that cheap shock out of the audience in that moment. And now this trilogy has to live on without you with that moment in it. And it doesn't. It doesn't make it.
Now, I think that the only way that works, there's one way that this works, is if there was a character we had already known in this particular franchise section that that actually was the one who was controlling Snoke, really was the one who was somebody we already met in the first two movies that maybe we suspected, was actually involved with all of this, or maybe somebody who was on the side of good, any other character that we could have picked from the cast to be that secret bad guy, ultimate bad guy that we didn't know, we had no clue was actually a Sith master and was like, ready to strike. They didn't have that person in mind.
Nope.
So
no plan.
There was no plan.
They didn't have much of anything in mind, really.
Yeah. So I mean, there could have been that. The only way this works is to have that character, whoever it could have been, anyone, that they could have picked to be that secret bad guy, that secret Sith Lord that was really ruling everything, or making all the big moves, in secret. And that would have been such a great subversion right there.
Yeah, but you have to lay the groundwork. There's still skill required. In fact, incredible skill. You're not really subverting expectations. I almost hate that term. What you're really doing is catching you're catching the reader or audience off guard with something that they should have expected but didn't. And you took the time to set that up, and that's very difficult to pull off. But you just killed the villain. So you have to have an answer for that, and they didn't.
I'll give you an example of a character that would have been perfect. Hux. He's right there. He's right there, and he's been playing against Kylo Ren the whole time for the first two movies. It would have been perfect to be like the secret Sith person behind Snoke. I'm just sort of confused why he just thought he was going to be able to just kill off that character and the fans were going to love him.
And he says he stands by all of it. I don't know how you can do that, buddy. This is an abomination of writing. I have to say, it's not sound writing.
Can I segue that into my writing points?
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to jump off. So if you want to put this up, so this is Rian Johnson's IMDb, right? Which I think is important to scrutinize in the context of this conversation. So before he landed what anyone would consider to be a golden dream ticket for any director who was a fan of Star Wars, he had done essentially two feature films, which is Brick, which is a weird film about teenagers doing weird shit. It's fine. It's very Donnie Darko, basically. I haven't seen The Brothers Bloom, and Looper, which is a sci-fi movie that's it's got some good things. It's got some interesting things.
I heard Looper's okay.
That is, if you look at this CV and you take it up to hit record TV, and then you look at those credits and you think of all the other directors that are out there, this is not a candidate to put in the middle film for the biggest trilogy in cinema history, because you're presumably trusting him with the reins to make as much money as the first movie. And I have to question, why did they think this guy was right for the job. And again, why was he given carte blanche to do what he wanted? Because as a relatively inexperienced director for hire, he should have been heavily guided, and the story structure should have already been in place. There's no way he should have been given the job of being writer and director.
Yeah.
And there's no other writer credited apart from George Lucas, and that is just an honorary credit for this movie.
Right, characters based off of.
Yeah, and I know that I've seen the interviews and stuff. He's completely unapologetic about all the decisions that he made. And to be honest, like you look back at the prequel trilogies, and it's like, okay, George had surrounded himself with yes men. Nobody really sought to challenge him because he was George Lucas. So he ended up making 3 relatively weak films because no one challenged him. But you can still see what he was trying to do. And there was one big story. This is somebody who basically went into this franchise, chucked a hand grenade in it because they thought that would be fun. And, you know, and now sort of rests on his laurels and said, oh, well, I did what I thought was best. That's utter nonsense. You can't even call yourself a Star Wars fan if that is your attitude. No fan of Star Wars of even the minimum level of competence, even if they weren't a writer professionally, would have written a script as bad as this. It's one of the worst pieces of writing and directing, in my view, in cinema history, and certainly the worst in any trilogy or any major IP. So now, those words said, he didn't work that much, and then really he's only done Knives Out, Glass Onion, and Poker Face since. That's not a huge amount of work. He probably doesn't need to work that much, to be fair. I'm sure he's got a big house next door to Kathleen Kennedy's or whatever. But anyway, I think it's important to look at how talented the man was when he was brought on and given that job. And in my view, he was completely unqualified.
Unqualified, and it shows. You know,
yeah.
And by the way, so we'll get to the end of Last Jedi, and then we'll call it. I could put a bookmark in this, and then the next phase is Lucasfilm versus the fans, because this changes everything. I mean, Last Jedi changes everything about Lucasfilm. Yes. It was at the vanguard of the culture wars, and it's crazy too, because, like you just said, Lance, this film is not good. It's not of good quality, and I'm gonna the craftsmanship, the visuals, the film that, you know, there's a lot of the tech guys in the background that don't get the big credits. They did a good job, but the writing, the directing, all the people at the top who controlled the final outcome of this story, really, I can't help but think that they just didn't like Star Wars. I hate to even say that, because it sounds like they're doing it maliciously, but I almost don't see any other way that this could get to the finish line unless you don't like Star Wars. There's even a line, I had watched it. I watched it out of spite one night, and there's a line where Luke is talking to Rey. It's at night. He's kind of in his like miserable phase. And he was like, what do you think, Rey? I'm going to come in with my laser sword and swing. I was like, laser sword?
Yeah.
I was like, Luke's calling it a laser sword? Like, this is a stupid idea. This is a dumb thing. And again, anti-heroic. Oh, you think I'm going to try to be a hero? And he calls it a laser sword. And I was like, no Jedi would call it a laser sword. You know who would call it a laser sword? Someone who would make fun of Star Wars outside the film.
Yeah.
That's who would call it a laser sword. So I was like, so there's all these little clues in there too, like that, where you could hear the mockery of Star Wars in the character dialogue. So I am of the opinion that this was written by someone who does not like Star Wars. And to your point, Lance, who does not know how to write a story.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I could also talk for 20 minutes about why this is one of the worst cinematic battles in cinema history that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And why are the AT-ATs wearing leg warmers? I don't know. They look stupid, man. They look like AT-ATs with those socks on that people used to wear, kids from Fame.
I'll just say this. I call this in writing, Lance, you know, that's a deus ex machina, means machine. But yeah, Luke, this is a problem too, and I'll be brief. In storytelling, there's something called the deus ex machina, which is machine of the gods, which means that God comes in to solve the problem for you. I call this a Luke ex machina because he shows up. And by the way, the opening night crowd cheered for this. This was a great, Luke has come back. He's decided to re-engage. He lights his lightsaber. They shoot at him, and he's not even there. That's the equivalent of it's all a dream. You cannot do that in writing, and you cannot do that with Luke Skywalker.
But they did do that with Dallas when Bobby stepped out of the shower and they eliminated an entire season. And that's what they should have done with the next film. Someone should have stepped out of a shower and gone, oh my God, I just dreamed of this really weird dream with there was a purple general and this happened. And Luke did this really stupid thing with his lightsaber. Thank God none of that happened. And, well, right, I'm gonna duck out now because I really should.
All right, Lance, take it easy. But we really
appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to taking part in the next one.
Awesome, Lance.
Yeah,
all right. See you guys soon. Bye.
Well, we lost Lance, and that's a shame because I was hoping we could make it to we're at the finish line here for this part. The final shot of The Last Jedi is this minor character who never comes back into the trilogy. He is nicknamed Broom Boy, and apparently
Broom Boy.
He uses the Force to move a broom into his hand and stares off into the sunset. Bizarre because he's not a main character. He's not even much of a side character. And he gets the final shot of the show as if his yearning, his longing is what we're all here to watch. And it is not. We don't really care about this character. And he never comes back in. This was a bizarre ending. And to me, it capped off the bizarreness of the entire film. I was left scratching my head to the most maximum extent. And so I think, like all of us have said, The Last Jedi has so many problems, right? So what do you do as a fan when you come out? You come out of the theater, and Retro, you said, like you and your mother, you know, like the importance of seeing the original trilogy together. You know, there's a real bonding that takes place in talking about movies. Yes. You know, it's why we're here tonight. We've all experienced this joy of kind of talking about films. So I remember leaving the theater and I was like, it's time to talk about The Last Jedi. I think this movie's bad. I think this is a problem. And on opening night, that really goes against the enthusiasm and zeitgeist. And I remember a lot of people were mad at me for being kind of down on it. Were you guys down on it right away?
I do remember being down on it right away when you're asking, what do you go and do? Well, what you went and do, what everyone went and did was go and rant on YouTube. Like everyone went to connect on YouTube. And
I watched all of those.
create that commentary class about of Star Wars. That, I mean, really, the YouTube Star Wars commentary class got off the ground because of that.
100%.
In the big way. So that's what everybody went and did. And then everyone found their own community on largely YouTube at the time.
That is exactly correct. So this film, you know, and by the way, while you're expressing privately to your friends and family members and trusted, you know, fellow movie buffs, your discontentment with this film, you're reading articles that are blaming the fans for being terrible bigots for not liking this film. And so we're going to leave off on this. And this is important because we're going to pick up this conversation where we left off with the next segment. And the next segment is what would become a massive issue in the culture war. How come this isn't loading up here? Add to stage. LucasFilm versus the fans. This film ignited not only a culture war where you have the legacy media and Hollywood as an industry going in hard to defend the film at the expense of the fandom that go to pay for it. You have the fans saying, no, we're right. This is not good. They launched an entire commentary class. YouTube exploded. That's where I discovered YouTube for the first time, and I started to follow people who said things. I was like, yeah, they get it. They know that this is a bad movie. So this really starts, I think, this moment here, the culture war explodes. And we get it in Star Wars, and Star Wars led the charge on this culture war where you have pop culture corporate level executives absolutely hating on their own fan base and preferring to like look for a new fan base in the meantime while they continue to make these multi-million-dollar projects. So that'll be next week. We'll get into this. I've got the receipts. Retro, I know you've got some of the receipts. So we'll move into the next phase of Lucasfilm there, where we really get into the battle lines after The Last Jedi.
Sounds good. This was
Heath,
great.
is there anything you wanted to say in closing?
I think this has been a fantastic analytical trip, and I think it's been very interesting that you also included the other cultural stuff that was going on at the time, putting the Lucasfilm situation not only chronologically but within the context of other things that were happening at the time. Because I often do think when things are going on, whether that's a major political thing, like I wish I had kept a timeline, like what was actually happening and stuff like that. Well, you've gone back and you've reconstructed that, and I think this is fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Heath. And where can everybody find you if they're interested in following you or listening to? You have a great commentary, and especially in the RPG world.
Yes, come over to the main channel is Heath's Geekverse. So we talk about tabletop games, specifically role-playing games, and we've been doing a lot of game design on the Heath's Geek on the Morning Grind live streams, which right now are happening Sundays and Wednesday mornings on the Heath's Geekverse channel, and then also Table Talk, which is the channel that Doug and Retro often appear on, where we have gone into Star Trek, Star Wars. We've gone into a lot of storytelling, Doug's books. Fiction and nonfiction, all of that's over on the Tabletop channel.
Awesome. And Retro, any last thoughts on today's segment?
Yeah, I didn't realize it until I was looking at the numbers, and I was like, wait a minute, it's been 10 years since Force Awakens. So we're coming up on the anniversary, like within, I guess, a couple of months. And it's just sort of like, wow, to the last decade of this sort of saga that we've been experiencing with Disney, Lucasfilms, Kathleen Kennedy, the whole, all of it has just been such a big chunk of that, and like trying to figure out what's going on, and the influences of the outside influences as well. Like there's been so much change in the last 10 years that it's almost scary. I wish it was positive change, and I hope at the outset, like on the other side of it, means that we have better communication with each other. We actually are more in sync with one another. We get better movies out of it, better storytelling. So let's cross our fingers and be hopeful that the next 20 years we get it right somehow.
Well, Retro, I'll say this. I am optimistic in general when
Yes.
it comes to things. I do believe good stories do win out. I do believe that the core of George Lucas's vision with Star Wars is fully intact. And I think that in the hands of a better steward, I think we might get better Star Wars. And who knows what'll happen. But no matter what happens, the past is still there. Those movies are still there. They'll never go away, and they'll never cease being great. But there is there are veins of gold in this era that we mostly don't like. There are positives. I think we've done a good job of being honest about what worked, what didn't. And there's going to be a lot more of that coming up. But I think we've done a good job addressing this in a fair light, in its historical context. And it's amazing how you said even 10 years later, already we could start to see the historical value of this story, history through the lens of Lucasfilm. And it's quite a tale.
Yes, and all of these things really matter. I think how society at large really affects movies. You think it doesn't, but it does. It's really movies are a symptom of the what's happening in the zeitgeist, what's happening in our world.
That's right.
Gone
Well, and
both
Retro,
ways
where
on how these
can everybody
movies are
find
retro
you? Let
affected
us
by
know.
Oh, you can find me on YouTube. I do a lot of retro reviews of movies and TV shows. I also do watch parties on Saturdays. But you can also find me on X as well, sharing a little info or two on some old retro movies.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thanks for listening in. I'm glad you made it this far. We will continue our in-depth, comprehensive study of the history of Lucasfilm in the Kennedy era next week.
All right.
Good night.
Looking forward to it.
Bye, everybody.